All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our weekly live stream series. This week we have an extra special treat. We have the amazing guitarist and educator and composer Mordy Ferber with us today. And this was originally supposed to be in a club, but we had to change venues last minute. I didn't want to cancel, so now we're doing the live streams here from Ted Brown Music, and we'll be doing the performance as well. So thank you for your patience. I-5 was a bit of a mess today, so we're starting a little bit late, but and we apologize for the inconvenience, but we're here now and ready to get things going. So, Mordy,
hey,
good to see you again. It's always a pleasure seeing you. This is, I think, the third time that I've seen you out here. And I think the last time was before the pandemic. We did a concert at McMinimans, I believe.
Exactly, yeah. I remember.
Well, as I mentioned, it's a pleasure having you here, and
thanks, buddy.
I know you're a wealth of knowledge and experience, and so I always forget to mention these things here. But before we get started, thank you to our sponsors, and of course that's Ted Brown Music, where we're broadcasting from today, KNKX Radio, Tacoma Creates, Titus Will Cars, Ed Jones, financial consultant Rick Gray, and BCRA Design. So without their support, that would make it really rough to do this, so we're very happy to have it, and hopefully you enjoy the fruits of our labors, and feel free to make an online donation as well to support things. Anyways, Mordy, I put your bio at the beginning of this so people can read some extra information if they're not aware of your work. I know many musicians already are, but can you talk a little bit about how you got started playing music? Like, where did life with music begin for you?
Well, it did start in Israel. I was first I was a singer, and I had an accordion player who accompanied me. You know, I think I was 6, 7, 8, 9, and then I really didn't like after a few years the way he was playing, and I said, okay, I will learn guitar quickly. So I went and studied classical. You know, in my days, you don't start to play pop music, classical music. You know. So after a few months, I just said, okay, enough with that, and I started to play. And most of my education was transcriptions from vinyls, you know, like any style. I'm not jazz yet, you know. I was not in jazz till 15 or something like that. Till the day I heard Django Reinhardt on the radio, you know, it was like a wake-up call. Like I didn't understand what I'm hearing. Like so it was so different than playing pop music, rock, jazz rock. So everything started in hi-fi in Israel, and then when I was 18, I joined the army band, and that saved me from not playing for 3 years. You know, because if you go to a regular unit, you can't play. So that was interesting. And actually, in the army, I met someone who was a very famous composer who was starting to do an album with the most famous singer in Israel. And so at 20, I already did an album with him, and then my career was just like, but I was really not interested in pop music. Every day I played 6 to 8 hours. Practicing jazz music, listening to ECM, to McCoy Tyner, to Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, you know. Of course, guitar players too. And then after I had a really nice success in Israel, and then at 23, I decided to go to Boston. I got scholarship, and I really thought I'm coming for 2 years, and it ended up to be 36 years.
Well, now, when you say Boston, Berklee School of Music in Boston, correct?
Yes.
And I want to talk about all this stuff, but I want to jump back. Was there music around in your house when you were younger? Were your parents musicians or any of that?
No. They were Holocaust survivors, so it was part of being in music was to escape the heaviness of the house. So music has, for me, a higher meaning than just the music. It was really saved me. You know, tough life they had, and I decided. I think that part of reaching where I got to be is because I didn't want to be in their shoes. You know, like they were treated so bad, and their family were killed, and all that. So I worked really hard, and there was no YouTube or teachers like in the state, and all that. So, but I'm happy it went like that. I wouldn't change a thing. you know.
Well, now you mentioned a lot of just transcriptions. Is a lot of your early education, was it all by ear? Did you learn to sight read? Was there any that?
Well, when I studied classical music in the beginning, I had to. Everything has to do with reading. But I think that after I started to play pop music again and rock bands and all that, the last thing there was is sight reading. It's not like today you have all these tablets and all that. There was no music written until I just got to the studio. I was a studio player for 3 years for CBS Records Israel. There I needed to read, but again, nothing to do like you, piano players. You know how you make a guitar player play quiet. You
put something in front of them.
You put notes in front of it.
Yes.
Suddenly.
Well, what about the city that you grew up in? Were there a lot of were there other children that played, or places where you could hear music live, or not so much?
Haifa had a lot of rock cover bands. It was really an amazing thing, almost like England. There were a band that covers Led Zeppelin, a band that covers Deep Purple. They were very big in those days, those rock bands. And so I would see that. And then I joined myself to a rock band. And it was a great time because at the age of 16 to perform 100 gigs a year, I wish I had a third now of that, and it was such an experience. I mean, you learn, you're on the stage, you get the feel of being on the stage and all that. So Haifa was definitely positive, even though it's not Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is like New York. It's the biggest things there. But it was a great way to grow, to grow up.
Well, I'm curious in terms of your ear, just being in that part of the world. Like, for example, I think we talked about this, my father's from the Middle East, and so we listen to a lot of Middle Eastern music, Persian music, Armenian music, which, of course, you have a lot of the microtonal stuff that I've heard. I mean, I don't know it, but I've heard it, those sounds. I'm assuming, is that similar for you growing up? Or?
Yes, I definitely heard some different music. And we had always, in Israel, Arabic music, like kanun, all those instruments that were very popular. And also Greek music. It's funny, very popular in Israel, the bouzouki and all that. So I've heard everything, so it's a mixture of so many things. That's why my music is, I don't have a title, what is it? It's influenced by so many different things, I do have to say that I'm not using my Middle Eastern gimmick thing much in my music. It's more European, because I have friends who are very into it now, and it's very successful when you go to Europe because they say, oh, what is this Israeli music? So when I come, it sounds like ECM stuff. It's what is this? So that's how I felt, you don't force stuff like this. You just go with the flow,
Well, I think it was Duke Ellington said there's two kinds of music, the good music and the other kind, right?
Yeah.
So, let's talk about, so you've got a really strong upbringing, good firm roots in music. You head to the Berklee School of Music in Boston, and they're, for people that don't know, they're long known as a good institution for training musicians, and they've had wonderful faculty members. So when you arrived at Berklee, who was teaching there at the time? Do you recall?
I think that the teachers who were there, they were there for like 40, 45 years. Like years after, I would still know, like Larry Bay on the guitar chair department, John Damian on guitar. Now, saxophone, there was a great flute player. He's gone. I met Marvuglo, I forgot he was, and George Garzone, always there. Bill Pierce. He's not there anymore, but he was there. Greg Battelado on saxophone. But I tell you the truth, for me, the main, what made me go up in the level is like playing gigs out in Inman Square, which was Cambridge. I can tell you that at 1985, I had a quartet. It was a one-time quartet, usually a trio, with Bob Mintzer, Miroslav, Vitous, and Bob Moses. And for a guy who comes from Israel, I mean, they were really known. Moses from Metheny, and Miroslav Vitous, Weather Report, Coryell. Bob Mintzer is an incredible player. And so I had a chance, really. I was very fortunate to play with some great musicians over the years there. You know, Donny McCaslin was in my band for a while. But after a while, I felt like Boston is a student town. And even though I built a name for myself, and I was teaching at Berkeley also, I decided to move to New York. Now, you don't move to New York just like that, you know. I didn't prepare myself. You come to New York and say, hello. I mean, like, it's not like today. Today, I mean, things are so different. My students from Israel, when they come to New York, they have all their friends already built up something going there so they can just join them, you know. And in those days, there was hardly nothing. If you didn't know the cats, you know, it's like, okay, you're in New York. So it took a year of really not doing much until I started to play. And then in 1992 or 4, I had my first gig at the Blue Note with George Garzone, Harvey S., and Jeff Williams on drums, you know. So that was kind of a breaking point for me, like starting to play at the Blue Note, even though there were other clubs, but the Blue Note was the name. So, and from there, you know, I started to teach at the New School, and played a lot with great musicians. New York had a different vibe, different rhythm, and you always knew that there is great people around you. So you never felt, okay, like, oh man, I'm the greatest. You know, it's always, you know, there is great people near you. So you're always on your toes and practicing and just wanting to get better all the time.
Well, let's talk about the New School, because just like Berkeley, they're well known for having wonderful musicians on their faculty. So when you were teaching there, who else was around at the time teaching?
The difference between New School, NYU, and Berkeley is that in the New School you could be a teacher that is not in the school. Even Jim Hall was part of and Eddie Gomez and many other people. If a student said to the chair of the department, I would like to study with Eddie Gomez or Jim Hall, they would say, okay. They contact Jim Hall and say, would you mind teaching this year or semester? And this is the way I was also. At NYU, I taught 20 years. I was assistant professor there. So that's a different story. I was part of the faculty. But New School had great teachers. I mean, some people were there all the time, like Vic Juris on guitar. And I mean, it's hard for me to even remember them because NYU is my main thing, you know, where Joe Lovano was, Garzone. Garzone teaches in so many places. Garzone, Chris Porter, Antonio Sanchez. I mean, a lot of people are there. Richard Bona, Adam Nussbaum, Billy Hart. Yeah. It's kind of, when I think about it, it's more like dropping names school in a way, because I rather have the good teachers and the names, because it doesn't mean they can teach well. I know that Kenny Werner, he's a good teacher. He was teaching there too. He's a really great educator. Dave Liebman is a great educator. NYU was my main thing, like in the last 20 years until I left 2012.
I have a question for you. I've taught a college program for 10 years, and I have many good and bad stories. I have several friends that have taught college programs, and you've taught extensively. I'm curious, and you don't have to throw anyone or anything under the bus, but I'm curious your perspectives on education maybe 10, 20 years ago versus education now. Do you think things have changed? Have things maybe been watered down a little bit? Have expectations been lessened? In your opinion, your personal experience, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, on one hand, you have all this information everywhere. You know, you go to YouTube, I mean, you have million lessons from people, just private people sitting there and teaching and all that. But I can tell you where I'm teaching right now in Israel, I have 20 people in that place that are on full scholarship, and then they go 2 years to Berkeley. They still come and they study even though they have all the information. So it's hard for me to say. Some people just give up on universities and just decide to study from YouTube or just buy lessons. You know, there is all these lessons you can buy from My Music Masterclass. I have videos there, and Bargonzi has videos, Liebman has videos. But I don't think it's the same at the end of the day. Yeah. You need to, I feel like that's what I feel. My students are sticking with me, no problem. But I feel like the people who are jazz, it's not just the theory. This is one thing. But one thing, another thing you can get from jazz musicians is the way of life of being a jazz musician. And also talk about your personality. You know, you have some great musicians that are really not very nice people. And they didn't have mentors. They didn't have people who would just say, hey, man, just take it easy. You know, like, you remind me of what nobody told me. I'm telling you right now. So it's beyond just lessons. You know, I had a trumpet player now for this year, and mostly her problem was just her personality. It's just impossible. It was difficult to teach her, but at the last few months, I felt like there was a breakthrough, and suddenly she didn't bring her heaviness, you know, like those people, those students who like to control the lessons. Well, today I want to talk about this. It's not like, you know what I'm saying? So I'm open for it, but it's definitely different. But from what I'm doing, it's very similar to me. Well, I did a clinic a month ago in a place in Israel called Mintzer. It's really, really far south in Israel. And I tell you, the students were so hungry because it's not like a big city. So when you come and you teach them, so I feel like it's a mixed thing. You know, you have people who just gave up on spending money. Who wants to go to NYU or Berkeley and spend, you know, $50,000, $100,000? You know, they can. But I think that another thing, when you study at a place, you meet people. So it's a lot of, there's great benefit in going to places.
It's a double-edged sword. I mean, there's so many different things on both sides that you can make arguments for. But I was just curious, I guess more so, do you feel that universities, I know sometimes things that used to be requirements for students to learn are not anymore from hearing from several different professors. I don't know if you've experienced that as well. I mean, it sounds like you hold your own students to your own personal standard, but curriculum that's taught in schools, sometimes maybe some things are done away with that are really strong skills that people need to learn.
A lot of the students that I meet, they miss like the basic stuff, meaning that they come and they play, they're here. I always give them the example of the chair. They're not here, this is here. They're missing certain things, they go right away. First of all, they forget about the history. They start right away from, you know, like the new saxophone players, the new piano players, new drummers, you know. They don't talk about Max Roach or Roy Haynes and all that. They just don't. They go straight to Kurt Rosenwinkel, where's Jim Hall, Wes, where's Kenny Burrell, Tal Farlow, where's Oscar Peterson, you know, so all those great people. So when I see that, I tell them to go back because it's so important. And the main thing for me, my way of teaching, is to let people get their own voice somehow. Because after you copy so many people, you can stay somebody who copies people, or you can dig deeper and start to find your own voice. Everybody has a voice. It depends how much you dug deeper into, you know, and the best time is when you're young, because then you get married, you get children, you get, who has the time? That I wish I had 10 hours a day now. Even if I have the time, I remember while I started playing that, oh, I didn't do that, I didn't call, I didn't pay that, even when I don't have anything to do. Right. So I always tell them, this is the time, guys. Yeah. Put everything now.
I want to jump back. Now, you mentioned Django Reinhardt. You mentioned pop music. From the guitar perspective, who were some of your early influences on guitar?
The classical part, I cannot even say. You know, I always liked Julian Bream with the music Villa-Lobos wrote to him. No, actually, Villa-Lobos wrote to Segovia, but Julian Bream was my favorite nylon string player. He was so much soul and feeling, you know, to it. So that's the classical, but rock was, you know, I think Richie Blackmore from Deep Purple. I would say B.B. King, Roy Buchanan, all the blues players and rock players, Jimmy Page. Jeff Beck was influenced, and then I didn't hear him for like 20, 30 years, and then I heard him again, and I thought that he is like a god. Even though I didn't listen to that thing, unbelievable. The guy got better all the time. So there were a lot of guitar players, so it's hard for me to really name all the kings, Albert King, B.B. King, Freddie King. They all had something to, and then of course McCaslin, and those jazz rock guy, Larry Coryell, so it's just, even though I was already into Django, but I was drawn to those other guys because they had the rock in their playing. Right. And because I came from rock, it was hard for me to get into Jim Hall in the beginning. Right. But then I became a huge fan of his.
Going back, you mentioned, Tal Farlow, Barney Kessel, Joe Pass. Those guys in there as well?
Joe Pass, well, yeah. Of course, virtuoso. And then Abercrombie, Ralph Towner, ECM. So I really started to listen to Kenny Wheeler. It's funny, we just heard me and Greg Kenny Wheeler in the car, and I discovered him in 81 or 82, and it was amazing. So for me, listening was a major thing. That's how I learned. But at some point, I stopped listening, not because I don't care. I just didn't want to be influenced. It's so easy to hear John Scofield. I forgot to mention this great guitar player, which is the only lesson I took in my life from John Scofield. I went to him 82 to his house. And so when you listen a lot, you start to imitate because it's so beautiful. And you have to be brave and stop that and look for your thing, But it's hard. So sometimes actually your career is better when you imitate somebody because people are familiar. They say, oh, I can dig it. It's in the world of Scofield. You understand? So, but yeah, I owe all those guys, Keith Jarrett, my God, Coltrane, Miles Davis.
Of course, yeah.
Other Cannonball.
Well, I was curious, how much of your time now is spent between Israel and the U.S. in 2023?
Until the corona, it was, I went there for family reasons, I didn't want to go back. So it was 4.5 months in the state and the rest in Israel. But in the corona time, Israel was one of the best places to be. I did a lot of live streaming to the Blue Note from Israel, and I was busy, even though the country was locked. There was a lockdown. But right now, very little, just for concerts. And I started to build a European side, because it's closer, much closer, like it's a third of the distance. But I still have a place in New York, and I still have to do my stuff,
So if I understand you correctly, it's very little time spent in the U.S. or
Yes,
okay.
Because I have a son in Israel, and, it's I cannot leave him.
Well, in your opinion, jazz audiences in Israel versus jazz audiences in Europe versus jazz audiences in the U.S. Compare and contrast.
Unfortunately, the U.S. is a joke. Unfortunately, jazz was born here, created here, and they treat it so bad. So I won't even go into that. Because this country is built on money, if something doesn't do money, and Europe they really appreciate art, really appreciate. It's not for no reason that jazz guys in the 50s went to Europe. Of course, it was easier for the black musicians to be in a place that they were accepted, and here it was tough. But Israel has a great jazz scene now, and there is a lot of successful Israeli musicians. So the jazz scene is very lively in Israel now.
Is it similar? It seems to me, even more so in Canada. People that live in Canada could say otherwise, but it seems like there's more built-in economics to support the arts in other countries than there is in the United States. And I'm not trash talking the U.S. because there are organizations that do mean well and try to help. However, it seems like there's more, as you say, art appreciation because there's a longer history of it, but also more built-in economic support from the government. Is that fair to say?
I would say for Europe, not Israel. For Europe, definitely. I mean, like, I'll give you an example. Jan Garbarek, I'm giving you an extreme example, such a successful. he would just get a certain amount from the government just to continue to do what he's doing. Nothing to do with his concerts and records and whatever he did, just so to continue, because they support the art. And some students from Berkeley that were with me when I studied, they got their tuition from the government. So Europe, no doubt. In Israel, it's starting a little bit, but it's a smaller scale, much smaller.
Well, let's jump around some more here. Can you talk about, you've worked on many different TV shows for soundtracks and things of that nature. Now you said you started at CBS Israel.
Oh, that's when I was in Israel. But the TV show started by chance. You know, I came to the NAMM show, and a friend of mine he was a student of mine at Berkeley, which I didn't see for a while. He was kind of really a problematic person, and he said, "Oh, Mordy, I'm going to meet you. In those days, you can come all the way to the plane. It's unbelievable. I will never forget that." He was waiting for me out of the outside the door of the plane. So he said, "Mordy, I have a company now. It's called Megatracks. It's we're doing library music and blah blah blah." And so I didn't care about that. For me, all I care is to play jazz, you know. And once I saw what he's doing, I told him, "Oh, you know what you're missing? Just for the fun," I said. In New York right now, there is a channel radio station called CD 101.9. It was very kind of smoothie, you know, like smooth jazz. And I didn't like it, but I thought he would need that for him. And he said, "Yeah, we don't have it." I said, "Fine, no problem." And we did the NAMM show. And before I left, he said, "Do you want to do 2 CDs?" I said, "Well, it's not really my thing." He said, "Come on, we're giving you an advanced and all that." So I took a friend of mine, Brad Hatfield. He's great piano player, played with me in Boston, and we did 2 CDs, and it was really good, man. I mean, completely not original, you know. I felt like, wow, but I said, "Gee, it's fun." You get not copyright, you get royalties and all that. So then I did like 200 cuts like this for this company and 2 other companies, but mainly for Megatracks. And the tunes got to all those, shows. The Sopranos, Everybody Loves Raymond, Baywatch, 6 Degree Under. I mean, it's like a list of everywhere in the world. It was, if I moved to LA and I just did that, okay, but it wasn't something I wake up in the morning and I say, "Okay, let me do a project for them." But I did about 12, 15 projects, you know, so.
I'm not in that part of the music field. I have other friends that have talked about it. In your opinion, it seems like companies are trying to get away from paying royalties to musicians and doing like a one-time buyout versus residuals over time. Was that your experience or no?
In the beginning, it was kind of fair. You know, they gave you the, sometimes when you come to a jazz musician and say, "Okay, here's $10,000, the guy hear it and he say, "My God, of course." And then you give them the publishing, which I will never do for my music, for my solo albums. But then you got the writer share. But then they started to play games with, they would do a blanket deals. Blanket deals, they take 20 musicians and they take all their CDs and give it to a company like ABC or whatever. And you see maybe 20% of what you saw before for royalties. So yeah, and the advance money went down all the time. So they were really trying to steal the music from the musician. And I said to myself, it's enough, you know. So there is royalty every 3 times a year, and I'm fine not doing it. Because you're right, 100%. They're really using the musicians.
Well, these are things that musicians should talk about, and I think it's things that the general public doesn't know about. I think if the general public saw the actual underbelly of the economics of the music world, they would be furious, because a lot of times people are donating to organizations and things, and really a pittance of the money that's generated to go to the musicians actually ends up going to the musicians. In my opinion, I don't know, maybe you can speak otherwise.
Well, also, don't forget that when they use, let's say, one of the projects I did a few years ago was a nylon string guitar and a string quartet. And the guy who wrote the arrangement was somebody who worked with Prince and Whitney Houston, and he wrote the arrangement for a string quartet. And we didn't get any advance just so what I'm saying is, when you think if they go to a famous writer and ask for something like this, it's going to cost them $500,000, and here they get it for free. Just give us the writer share. So it's, you know, I can't tell you it's fair, you know. Yeah.
All right, fair enough. So teaching, you do a lot of teaching. You've taught for all these different institutions over the years, and you're teaching Israel. Due to the pandemic and the coronavirus, did you end up doing more online teaching than you had in the past?
I did, and actually, you know, some people don't want even to go back. Right now, while I'm here, I'm teaching only via Zoom, you know. With me, I think that you lose something, because part of my lessons is playing with the students. And this is one thing you cannot do online. There is a delay. So the people who knows how is it to be in front of me are not that happy about it. So if they say, Mordy, I rather wait for you till you come back, I'm okay with that. I don't force them. But lucky for me, as I said before, in the pandemic, the government let teachers in places like the place that I teach go and teach. So I would be one of the few on the road. You know, country was locked, and I would go. I would have a paper with me that I'm from the, you know, education department, and I was fine. You know, you couldn't do online ensembles, so that was a problem. But I think that I have to admit that Israel was the best place to be in the pandemic, which again, until today, I don't know what was it, you know.
The reason I was asking was kind of a selfish reason for people that wanted to study with you. If you accept students online and you teach, it sounds like you do, but it's not your favorite thing to do.
No, I'm doing it a lot. And I have a guy in Switzerland that he's with me for 10 years, a guy from a city in Eilat, which is far away in Israel. And it's fine, you know, because not everything has to be a jam session. I can work on improvisation, harmony, composition, a lot of things, you know. But when we meet, it's the playing together, which I like. So it's, you know, when I went to see Schofield in '82, he wasn't really, he didn't care about teaching, or he was really weird. And I admired the guy, you know. So it wasn't a lesson, but we played. And I can tell you, I recorded it on cassette, and that playing with him was such an influence on me. Just Stella by Starlight, and because you were in front of him, he was playing, and it was amazing. So it's nice, but it's okay to teach online, definitely.
I want to jump around again. I remember when I was in college, Phil Markowitz, pianist.
Oh yeah, with Liebman, yeah.
Do a workshop. And he was talking about comping behind Michael Brecker and Dave Liebman. I think he mentioned George Garzone too. I'm curious from your perspective as a guitar player, because I know you've played with all these folks. Can you speak to how you might, for people that don't really even think about along these lines, but how you might comp differently depending on playing with those folks in those situations?
Yes. For example, Tiger Okoshi is a trumpet player that I played with him in the 80s. He's a great trumpet player, and he wouldn't like if I stopped comping. Of course, my comping was very modern, and he would wait for a chord to go there. You know, he really wanted that. Liebman, because everything I heard him doing with Richie Beirach, I knew that I can play horrible chords, and he would love that. Just give him a chord that it's sour and annoying, or he would love that. Brecker, different story, you know. He doesn't need that, so he just wants to play his thing, and you don't want to bother him too much. I mean, listen to Mike Stern. I think he was comping. Metheny hardly comped for him in the records. It's just Herbie there doing his thing. So yeah, you're right, 100%. Not everybody. I think that Garzone also. I'm not sure that Garzone liked so much. You know, Garzone is doing his chromatic. Triadic approach, and it's like he's so out. You rather just play major chord, you know. He's so out, you know. So I think that he wasn't into. He didn't need that so much. He never told me anything, but I could feel that you can leave him actually alone and not comp. he'd love to play with the drummer. Just go to the drummer, and I saw him once. There was the electricity fell down in a gig of Kurt Rosenwinkel in Italy, and he just went to the drummer and he played a crazy solo. And he doesn't need. Some people need somebody to charge their thing. They need something, and some people just have it. They just don't need. I like both.
All right, well, let's talk about, and again, we're jumping all over the place. And I forgot to add, too, please, the nature of these things, if anyone has questions for myself or for Mordy, put your questions in the comments. I'll do my best to get to them. Normally, there's someone monitoring the feed here, and it's just me on my phone. And sometimes the questions don't come in, but the whole nature of this is so that you can ask questions. So either we'll do it in real time or after the fact, but please post your questions, and we'll do our best to get to them. So I want to go a little bit towards the economics of... we can talk about music in general, but more particularly jazz gigs from like the 1980s versus now. In your opinion, where are things? Where is the state of affairs in terms of the economics of jazz and performing jazz in 2023?
Well, I think that when you meet a great a club owner, it's like having a great doctor, because they treat you well. A lot of club owners just know that you need the gig, and they will take advantage, and then they will take, there's a club in Israel that he takes 50% for himself from the door, so I don't play there anymore. First of all, the Blue Note doesn't take nothing, because they have the food and the drinks, and they give you a guarantee. But that's the Blue Note. But I think that some people are fair, but I don't see anybody, I think it's hard to make a living from playing the clubs. I think that that's why education, composing, those are must, unless you're doing you can play a lot of gigs during, it's okay. But it depends where and all that. It's hard for me to say, but I don't think I'll be able to, if I just did that and I didn't do the gig of teaching in the university and writing the music for TV, that's what holds me. That's what keeps me doing only what I want to do. Yeah. This is the best way to say it.
It seems more and more to be a successful musician, and we could gear it, again, more towards jazz. You have to have lots of different revenue streams coming in to make it work in order to be able to play what you want to play. I know some folks, if you just did a cover band, lots of money's in cover band because that's the popular music of the day and that's what everybody wants to hear, but you'd be spending all the money that you're making on therapy, I would think. I don't know. I guess the other question that I wanted to ask you is the state of jazz in 2023. You've done so much with so many artists, broad spectrum of artists, starting in the 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way up till now. Where do you see, in your opinion, jazz headed? Everyone says, well, jazz is dead, and some people say there's the revival, and all. There's lots of different opinions about it. What are your opinions about the state of jazz in the world right now?
For me, talking about where I am right now, where I live now, it's far away from being dead. People are very much into it, and I don't know exactly because I missed being in New York for a while, but LA, I'm not sure if there is anything really going on there, but New York has stuff, but I think that Israel and Europe are the places. That Japan used to be a big center for jazz, and I don't think it's as it used to be. The music genre is changing. Like since Corona time, if you look at the Blue Note to see what's going on there, it's a joke, and it's my favorite club, but they have like really different kind of style of music. Forget about the old days, and it's just 80-90% is just funk.
It's funny you mentioned that. I'm known for straight ahead. People know that that's my preference, and I lean towards that. Bebop and straight ahead and that kind of stuff. People say to us all the time, we get this comment almost every other gig. People come and say, I don't like jazz, but I like what you guys play. And not just in this country, other countries too. So I think maybe part of that, and again, this is just totally my opinion here, and feel free to jump in. Part of that is music that's being pushed as whatever. It's less swing, more backbeat. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No.
But I don't know. It is different, and then you see kind of things blowing a certain way with trends and the way music is. It's more about, I think it's more about the music business and less about the actual music itself. Is that a fair assessment in your opinion?
Yes, yes. I mean, for me, seeing last year Herbie Hancock in the summer stage in New York was such a relief. It was such a great thing. Herbie has everything in it. He has this style of music, but I feel like that place like the Blue Note, and I don't want to get stuck on him, but they didn't need charity. Birdland, they had $500,000 donation, so they don't close the club, because they really do like singers and stuff like that. But the Blue Note found a way, because they're also a franchise, so they have things in Japan, in China, in Brazil. They just found a direction. It's just really, I'm not even talking about bebop or modern music. It's really like, it's like a party. Yeah. And people go for the party, but I don't put down any music. I just feel like, for me, this music is to be in the moment, the improvisation, to be in the zone. And if you're not there, I'm not interested. I'm not against, but it doesn't do it to me,
If there's any questions, put them in. I'll do my best. And sometimes they come in after the fact, so forgive me if we don't. Well, we're getting close to the end here. Let's see. So, any projects coming up that you're currently working on that you want to discuss? Any albums or things that you're involved with? Or
my next thing that I want to do is my music with a big band. I want to record an album. I just finished producing an album for a singer-songwriter, and I'm going to finish it at the end of the month. And as I said, I'm going to start to play more like in Europe and in Morocco with a saxophone player. He's more like, I don't know, in Indian or... so just different things, I need to realize that I'm not in New York anymore and start to do more stuff there. And so my next thing will be playing in the New Morning and Sunnyside in Paris. But yeah, always writing and doing stuff, that's...
Speaking of writing, I think I remember asking you about this a few years ago. When you compose, write stuff, do you do by hand, old school? Do you use music notation software? What's your process of getting stuff down?
I think that I'm with the guitar, and a lot is nylon string guitar. It doesn't matter if the tune is going to become up-tempo. I start to, either a melody or something, or I play some chords, and I don't have a specific way. If I want to do a pedal point tune, then I take some sample and I do ba-dom, be-dom, ba-dom, ba-dom, like Mr. X. So different ways of doing things. But I play rubato stuff, I slow down everything to my own breathing, and then I play it and I say, okay, that's nice. Let's continue, or just hold there and just stretch this fragment. And it's a process, When it's music for me, and I'm not technical about it, it takes time. When it's something that somebody asked me to write, then I'm more technical about it. But
I guess what I'm meaning is, do you write things down on paper once you get an idea, like this is the thing?
Yes.
Do you write it down on paper, or do you do like Sibelius or Finale or one of these
I'm
things?
not there yet.
Okay.
I mean, of course, I have my book is on Finale and all that, but I just write. I have a great memory, and I can do something and then remember it, but not in the last few years, I have to be honest. The memory I used to have, not there. So yeah, write the ideas and handwrite.
All right. Well, we're getting to that the end of the time here. And again, if I've missed your question, I apologize. Sometimes they don't come through on my phone the way that I would like them to in time. But last 5 minutes here, we ask this of all our guests. In 2023, you've had all these amazing musicians and experiences that you've been around. And if someone were coming to you, and I'm sure students do, and they say, I'm thinking about being a professional musician, what's some information or some experience that you've found personally incredibly helpful for you to develop as a musician that you would pass along to them in terms of like advice?
Give me an example, like from playing with other people, or
No, no. If someone is coming to you and say, Mordy, I'm thinking about becoming a professional musician. What's something that you found personally incredibly helpful for you to become who you are as a musician that you think would be important to share with them?
Gee, like I said before, for me the most important thing is that after you learn the basic and all that, for me is to dig deeper into yourself and bring something from yourself. And if you want to sound like, if you want to be an important musician and not a great player, then start to write music also. It's very important. Like when you think about Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, Metheny, all those people it's a full package, you know. And just practice and never stop wanting to get better. There's no way that you're where you can be, never, including myself. You know, it's so. And the most important thing for me, be a nice person. You know, forget about only the theory and the chords and all that. Be a nice guy. Be a nice girl. You know. So for me, that's important. That's what I do with my students.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
It's
you.
an honor to have you with us here today. We're going to take a very short break and then reconfigure and then do the performance for you. Again, if you find value in these interviews that we do every single week, feel free to make a donation. You can do that online via Venmo or PayPal or mailing a check. All that info is at the beginning of this post here, and we'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Corinne.